Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Big Idea Podcast. My name is Eric Bramlett, and I am joined by Tammy Melchien.
Hello.
How you doing today, Tammy?
Doing great, thanks.
You look great. We're color coordinated from, in relative colors. We did not plan it, but we are happy about it.
We are.
We are talking about a brand new series that is coming up, and of course, you know all about it if you attended our staff kind of dinner that kind of unveiled this One Initiative that's taking place. But this is the Big Idea Podcast for the One Initiative, a 5-week series. And actually, we just got out of some teaching brainstorms for the talks. So we're well on our way with this series, and this is an opportunity for us to share a little bit about what this series is so that you can brainstorm some awesome moments during your weekend services. So let's start. What are we talking about? What is the One Initiative? What are we hanging our hats on with this series?
Okay, well, like you said, hopefully you're well aware of the One Initiative coming up. But this whole series, the big idea is as one church with one vision, we're going to accomplish the one mission together. So obviously the idea of being one, being better together, being one heart and one mind, of being a generous church is the thread that runs throughout this entire series.
Hashtag family win.
Yep.
I love it.
And that key passage is that Acts 4, 32 to 35. So we'll probably look at it in both the normal NIV, but we like the way that, too, the message says it. It talks about the whole congregation of believers was united as one heart, one mind. They didn't even claim ownership of their own possessions. No one said, that's mine, you can't have it. They shared everything. So that's going to be, you'll see that passage throughout multiple weeks in this series.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's great. And we've had some stakeholder gatherings too that have kind of laid this stuff out, and it's been really well received. So I think we're in really good shape to put together a series of weeks that I think are really going to challenge us in our generosity, challenge us in thinking in terms of others instead of ourselves. And it's really exciting. So let's start with week 1.
All right.
Week 1, we're one church, January 31st. So where are we headed with this big idea, Tammy?
Okay, well, week 1 will serve as the overview for the whole series. It'll introduce the One Initiative. The plan is for this to be a mixture of kind of all-skate video and some in-person teaching by the campus pastor. So the way that that's going to break down is that it'll probably start with Dave on video, speaking to everyone, casting the big picture vision for one. When we get to the crux of the word section, which is that our theme section from Acts 4, when we get to the crux of that and the points we want to draw up from that, we're going to go to the campus pastor, but then back to a number of voices actually talking about the different initiatives that are involved in one.
Oh, very good.
So the big points of this one that we're going to walk away with is just, again, the overview, introduction of one, but also that the one is about something that God wants to do in us, and it's also about something God wants to do through us. And that's primarily what we're going to hit in this first one.
And so as we dive into that Acts 4 passage for that week, I mean, what are we looking for in terms of takeaways when we look at the Acts 2 church, or the church in the book of Acts? Mm-hmm. The way in which they shared everything, it's not just kind of it's an example, but it's something that we want to aspire to as well.
Yeah. We're going to talk about what it means to be an Acts 4 church, and we'll come back to this again in the last week of the series, but basically it's interesting, if you look at that passage, it describes them being one in heart and one in mind, but then it goes on to talk about a practical, tangible way that this oneness lived out, and that's through generosity. And so the sharing of kind of looking at this not as mine, but ours is a key to this whole initiative and part of that. And so we'll be challenging people with that. And talking about, quite frankly, in this first one, we're going to spend some time, too, talking about how, if we met our financial goal of this initiative by one person coming in and writing a big check, we wouldn't really get our goal.
Right.
Because our goal is for everyone to be one together, for everyone to parparticipate.
100% participation,
yes, yeah. So that's going to be some of the key points of this first one.
Oh, that's very good. So we're definitely setting the table, and the other encouragement, I think, is for our small groups to be, committed to this series and making sure that what's happening in our small groups during the week is in line, and we're going to be developing products for small groups that are above and beyond sort of the normal routine. So it really is like this I don't know, this epic coming together of all of our campuses for this one mission. So it's really, really exciting, and that is week one. Kind of setting the table, laying out some of the objectives. So then week two, we start to dive in a little bit more into the storyline of how this kind of can play out. So
how
where
we
we
can
headed
become
with,
how we can become that Acts 4 type church.
Right.
Yeah.
Week one is we want to do that.
Yeah.
How do we actually start doing it?
Yeah. So 2, 3, and 4 are the how, and for each one of those, we're going to focus on a narrative involving Jesus. And so in week 2 is about one God, and we see one of the reasons the Acts 4 church was able to live united as they were is they had one God. That God was number one in their lives. And so this week is a challenge to us. Is God really number one in our lives? And the narrative we're going to use is the narrative of the rich young ruler. Because, it's interesting when you look at that narrative too. This guy, he falls on his knees before Jesus, in a sign of reverence. He calls Jesus good, which, Jesus says, "Why do you call me good?" I don't think Jesus is saying that because he shouldn't be called good. It's more kind of like to the guy, yeah, you're calling me good, but something's not right here,
Yeah.
And so, this guy, he's sincere about following commands. He comes and he wants to know, Jesus, what do I need to do? But what Jesus does is he goes to the heart of the one thing that is keeping this man from having God as number one in his life. And in this man's life, it is his wealth and his possessions. And, Jesus doesn't make that kind of statement to everybody. He did to this particular guy because he knew it was the one thing standing in the way. And I think for many of us, if we get honest with ourselves, that same one thing stands in our way.
Sure.
We say, like so many of us, we're faithful to attend church. We might be in a small group. We might be contributing in some way in a ministry team. But then when the church starts to talk about money,
we freak out. Yeah.
we freak out. We, like the rich young ruler, we bow our head and we go away
Walk
sad.
away sad,
or maybe we go away angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I think one of the lines it's going to be pretty direct that we're going to talk about in this message is, like, if that's your response to hearing talks about money, would you at least consider the possibility that maybe God isn't one in your life?
Right.
Would you at least explore that as we go through this series?
Yeah, and Jesus follows up with talking about, kind of you can't serve both God and money.
Yeah.
That gets right down to the heart of it. If God is number one in your life, then anything else is number two. And so it's tough when money is number one. And I would say that probably one of the bigger challenges of this week is going to be that there's such a knee-jerk reaction, there's such a defense mechanism that people will assume that they've heard this before. And in many ways, I think we have an opportunity to share this kind of story with people for the first time if we can set it up in such a way that they will be willing to hear it. We definitely are going to utilize testimony in this week to be able to align someone's experience as they're sitting in the congregation with somebody that's where it's happening on the screen. So that's going to be a very important part. But then there are also some takeaways or some things that we want to make sure people understand about what it means to make God number one. Will you share just some of these that show up here? This we
trying
know.
to remember which one of these we actually.
Oh, which one you solidified with?
I'm not sure this is like actually how it broke down in the message we planned.
Gotcha. Well, it's evolving. It's an evolving experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the stop making excuses and trust that realizing this is about, when you look at the story of the rich young ruler, I think most of us have the reaction where you almost want to go, no, don't walk away. You're missing out on the best thing that could ever happen in your life. And in some senses, that's the way we want to challenge people to look at this opportunity to be generous and an opportunity to make God number one in our finances is we don't want them to miss out on encountering Jesus.
Yeah. And if you've been in a small group where, real conversation has taken place about the stranglehold of money in our lives, I mean, you know that how much better a life of freedom and generosity can be. And so, it really is, as much as it's, tentative waters, being bold with this talk and being bold with this content is really going to be, I think, the thing that turns it for a lotot of people, and especially if we're going to hope to get 100% participation.
And it
we
should
have to
generate a lot
tackle
of conversation in small groups.
Absolutely. All right, well, week 3, we move from one God to one in heart and mind, one heart and mind. So where are we headed as we are evolving this experience of being one?
Well, if you think of the passage, again, it says the whole congregation of believers was united as one heart and one mind. And when you think about it again, like, we love that idea of unity. We love the idea of being together. But again, when you throw money into it, most of us don't think about our finances in terms of we and in terms of together. We think of our finances in terms of me. And there's one quote that we're going to use by Jen Hatmaker in here where she talks about how, we need to transform and grow from me to we, from I want to what do we need, and so this message we're gonna almost say, I think, near the beginning, okay, let's just assume that all of us that are here, we do really want to be an Acts 4 church. We really want to be of one heart and one mind, and again, a practical expression of that is generosity. Okay, what does it take for us to become that? How can we be transformed to be that? And
transformation becomes the key word then.
Yes.
And especially with the Bible story that we plan on using.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about Zacchaeus then.
Yeah, so we're going to say, well, let's look at the Bible, and there is a story here of Zacchaeus who was one of the most dramatic transformations we've seen in someone when it comes to finances. And so, in that story, you have this guy who was basically a traitor to his own people, and a lot of that stemmed around what he did as a job involving money and the way he cheated people money. He undoubtedly...
the expectation, the assumption that he was definitely doing that for sure.
Yeah.
They all were.
And for his own wealth and his own benefit. And he was a chief tax collector, so he was even teaching other people to do that as well.
He was on the top of the pyramid tax collector scheme. Yeah, absolutely.
And then he has an encounter with Jesus. And what happens in that encounter with Jesus is we see this almost instantaneous transformation in a number of areas. We see his money practices transformed. He goes from swindling people to figuring out how he can, give away half of his possessions, how he can give back anyone he swindled or cheated 4 times what he took from them. So we see how he handles money differently. We see that he transforms how he relates to others. All of a sudden now, one of the things is the paying back 4 times. You could almost understand that from the sense of, I wronged you, so now I'm going to make restitution for that. But the whole giving away 50% of his possessions to the poor, he didn't have to. He didn't owe the poor anything.
Right.
He didn't have to, but all of a sudden now he cares about a group of people that earlier he could have cared less about. You see a transformation of his heart.
You see a physical expression of that. Yeah, tangible.
And you see a transformation of his purpose for living. Now, we don't know what happened in his life afterward, but, I think there's probably some safety in assuming that his life took a different shape after this encounter with Jesus. And so, really, we're just going to tie that to ourselves of, those 3 things, that there are certain money practices that do we need to look at and say, okay, is what we're doing currently with our money, does that need to be transformed in some way?
Right.
Do we need God's heart to transform us for other people in a way that maybe, if we're honest, we don't really care about right now?
Right. And does it feel like we're getting more into kind of getting closer and closer to a commitment Sunday, getting closer and closer to trying to express some options, what does this actually look like for someone to demonstrate the same kind of transformation that Zacchaeus did in this initiative.
Because it's interesting in the in our theme verse, Acts 4, we say they're one heart, one mind, and a tangible expression of that was generosity. The same way, Zacchaeus has this life and change encounter with Jesus, and the tangible expression of that is generosity. So it seems like generosity is kind of key in showing something really happening.
Yeah, it's some good selfless stuff there. I love it. All right, so week 4 then we're getting to the big sacrifice word, and so it's push comes to shove kind of time, and really all or nothing kind of stuff. So where are we headed with this word sacrifice?
Okay, well, early on we're going to talk about how we're actually planning. Can I talk about the clip?
Yeah,
What's his name again?
Bing Bong.
Bing Bong.
Bing Bong.
We're probably going to use the
Inside
clip
Out?
from Inside Out.
Yeah, Bing Bong.
Where Bing Bong sacrifices himself for joy.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, in case you haven't watched it. Anyway, so we're going to use that clip, and in the beginning we'll talk about how little, like, we're so, we're moved by stories of sacrifice. Like I bawled when I'm sitting there thinking I'm watching a cartoon, crying.
Totally.
We're so moved by those. But early on, we're going to set up the question, but how do we really respond to sacrifice? Because the reality is, when we see stories of sacrifice, I think some of us go, I could never do that. Some of us go, why would they do that?
Right.
Some of us even, one of the things we were talking about in teaching team was, there sometimes when people get up and share their stories when we're doing capital campaigns and share about how they're moved to sacrifice, some people actually even have an angry reaction to that.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Who do they think they are? What,
Right.
That type of thing. And so we're gonna call some of that early on in the message and pose the question, like, how are you really going to respond to sacrifice? So then we go into we have the story here of the woman who broke the alabaster jar of perfume,
right,
and anointed
Jesus' feet.
Yeah, the version, the account we're going to use, she actually
it's the head.
anoints him, with the
That's
head.
right.
And so we're actually going to move through that scripture almost in a more expository way, like line by line pulling out some points in here, because you see things in here like, for example, in the Mark account we're using, she's unnamed. And so even as we bring out this, to understand the point of this was not making a name for herself.
Right.
It was about honoring Jesus. And even as we think about this capital campaign,
Right.
sacrifice is not about making a name for myself.
Our name great.
It's about how we're honoring Jesus. And so as we move through the talk, then we're going to look at some of the things she did. One, it was really a total sacrifice. And if you look into the cultural background of some of this, the alabaster jar, I'd never thought about this before. I mean, that in itself was valuable. She didn't have to break it. Like, she could have poured,
Right.
She could have poured the ointment, but it was almost like this sense of, no, everything is going to be given for this purpose. And so it was pretty extreme. But, in the same way that the widow's mite that gave 2 pennies, that was extreme as well. So it's not about the amount. It's about this kind of total posture in that. So we're going to, we'll look at that. We'll look at about how she was motivated by love. We'll look at how there was, her sacrifice really left a legacy. Jesus said she'll always be remembered, and here we are 2,000 years later still talking about her.
Yeah.
But the landing point of this story then is also, you see the other Christ followers, the other disciples in the room who became indignant.
Right.
So when they saw sacrifice, they actually got kind of angry.
Yeah.
And so that brings us back to that illusion of how are we going to respond? Now, the thing is, it's 2,000 years later and we're talking about her, but we're also talking about how they were.
Right. Yes. And forever we will remember how terrible the disciples were in their reaction.
Yeah. So there's some challenge to us, but Julie Bullock gave us a good question that, when we'll have a testimony again of someone involving sacrifice in this, but when we come back, like from that testimony, we'll again, every week we're going to have that pledge card, foreshadowing what's coming the following week. But we're also, that question of what am I not giving to God and why is a question we're going to challenge people. And the way that Julie talked about it today was a little different for me than I understood it in the past. it's almost like to look at every way you spend money. So you might look at what you spend on housing costs and ask yourself, okay, why am I, I'm not giving the money that I'm spending on housing costs, and why? And you might come away from that going, no, I think that's legitimate what I'm doing. That's fine. Okay. But you also might come away from that going, I don't need to live in the size house I need to,
Right,
there could
right,
be,
yeah.
and only each of us can answer that about everything
Right.
in the way we're using money.
Right. But it requires walking through that process with all of the ways in which
Yes.
you spend and ask that question, And for some people, it's going to be about, Starbucks.
eating out, or- yeah.
eating out, or, that motorcycle or that extra car that's sitting, in the
Yeah.
shop or, in the garage so that doesn't get any rust on it, but
Yeah.
it also doesn't ever get driven. There's so many examples, so many ways in which our society values that kind of stored wealth.
Yes. Yep.
But then also just kind of, if you're going to make that sacrifice, you have to map it out.
Yeah, and you have to know. And the overarching thing in all of that, as you look at all of that stuff in your life, is this honoring Jesus?
Yeah.
Is this honoring Jesus? And, we just want to challenge people to wrestle with that as they look forward to week 5.
Yeah.
Which is
the big old
Sunday.
Commitment Sunday, one mission. I love that. You segued right into week 5.
There you
I didn't
go.
have to say
Look
it
at
at all.
that.
So yeah, this is the big day. This is the big Commitment Sunday, and we're looking to wrap it all up and really be able to celebrate 100% participation. So how are we going to lay that out for our attenders and set them up for success?
Okay. Well, obviously there'll be a little bit of a recap of where we've been in this, and I do believe we're going to hopefully have something from kids and students to show.
Yep.
They're going to do a commitment weekend the weekend before,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
we'll get to celebrate that. There's a Rick Warren quote that I don't think is in the map that after we see what the kids do, he said something along the lines, I don't have the exact words here, but he said, like, our life is defined by the commitments we make. And when you think about that, I mean, it's like the major things that define your life are all attached to a commitment.
Yeah.
Whether that's, what job you commit to, whether that's
college.
what college, the person you choose to commit to marry,
Yep.
like whatever it is, the financial commitments that you make. I mean, the house that you buy determines a lot about the course of your life, like where you're going to put roots down
Yep,
and all of
where
that
you
stuff.
live. Yep.
And so the major commitments in our life, really, I mean, our life is determined by the commitments we make. And so in this message, we're going to basically be saying we have an opportunity here to make a commitment to something that, will shape our lives and others' lives today. So a key of this message is that, we do want to say, okay, this can make a difference, impact down the road, but this is also about what's happening today, like of what God wants to do in and through us today.
Yeah.
And so the key passage we're going to look at is the, the Ephesians?
Ephesians 3,
The Ephesians 3 one. And again, we're going to walk through that a little bit in verse by verse form. Bringing some ideas. It's gonna bring some ideas that allow us to recap. The first part of that passage talks about where is it here? Okay, let me back up here though to the beginning of it, where he says, "From whom every family in heaven and earth derives its name." Just going to give us a chance to recap and talk again that this is about a family, that we are a family, and this is a family win today.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And then we'll move down through the rest of the verse talking about this is about how we're going to love God today. This is about, there was one phrase in here that
strengthen your power
Yes.
through the Spirit in your inner being
Yes.
so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith.
Yes. And then we also are going to talk about the phrase love that surpasses knowledge. And we're going to use that to a little bit, like anytime we talk about commitment, a lot of times you start to have all these anxieties and you worry because you don't know, you don't have the knowledge of what is going to happen in the future if I commit to this, or will I be able to do that?
Right.
Like all of those anxieties that rush at you. But that phrase, love surpasses knowledge. And to think about, both God's love for us, I mean, he knows all the crap about us. but his love for us surpasses that knowledge.
Right.
And even for us, this is an opportunity to say, okay, I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty there. I don't know what's going to happen in my life for these next 2 years, but I'm going to let my love for Christ surpass that knowledge as I make this commitment.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That is good stuff. Well, my encouragement to all of us as we're experiencing this is, we have an opportunity not only to plan out and be strategic and be creative about what's going to take place over these 5 weeks, but we also have the opportunity to go first. And so, as much as it's important for us to take in this content for the purposes of brainstorming, my hope and my prayer, and I'm sure Tammy would agree, is that like all of us who are experiencing this will begin the process of transformation ourselves, and be in a position that by the time we get to this, that we have been challenged, we have been encouraged, we've been asked to stretch, and we are in a position to really be able to demonstrate what that sacrifice can look like. Because as people on staff or in positions of leadership, we will be looked to as examples. And so I hope this is encouraging for you, not only about the overall direction of the church and where we're headed in this next season, but also will challenge you in terms of generosity. Where are we right now in our generosity? What does God want for us in this experience? And can we go first in laying out that sacrifice and putting God number one in our lives? So I don't know, anything you want to share along those lines?
I think that was said well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We are excited about this series. I think it's going to be just for our church, it's a life-changing experience. I'm excited for what it means for us to have this #FamilyWin and to really move forward together, really truly doing things together that we could not do if we were doing them separately. So thanks for your involvement in that, the way in which you make that possible, and I look forward to just an absolutely fantastic series. So this has been Tammy Melchien and Eric Bramlett for the Big Idea podcast, and we will see you next time. So long, everybody.